After going down against Miami, CJ Cox's status could very well determine Purdue's fate as they try to punch their ticket back to Indianapolis.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network where it's your team every day. I am your host. I am Nick Arvin. I talk Boilermakers every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the only daily Purdue show out there. And I also write about Purdue for Purdue 24/7. We've got another good episode of Locked On Boilermakers headed your way today because we're talking about CJ Cox. More specifically, what is his status heading into Thursday's Sweet 16 matchup against the Longhorns? Is he good to go? If so, what type of production can we expect out of CJ and how that might determine what Purdue's fate will be as they play for a chance to get to the Final Four this weekend? Then we'll get into my Sweet 16 power rankings. I'm ranking all the teams left based on their path to get to the Final Four, based on how good they're looking, and we'll figure out what my 1 through 16 is right now. Then we'll get into my keys to beating Texas to end out today's episode. What are the Longhorns' vulnerabilities? Can Purdue exploit that, and will they move on to a matchup on Saturday in the Elite Eight? So I appreciate you guys being here today for another episode of Locked On Boilermakers. But before we get into all of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. During the tournament, FanDuel is offering $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. So head on over to FanDuel.com to get started. Now, with that being said, this past Sunday, it was Purdue and it was Miami, a game where in the first half, Purdue they struggled. Braden Smith certainly struggled with 8 turnovers in that game, but one player that didn't struggle throughout the course of that one was CJ Cox, who showed exactly what he does. He shot it on a low volume, but still came away with 11 points in 18 minutes. That's exactly what you want from a guy like CJ. Also played good defense on the other side. He's, of course, our best defender, especially at that guard position, and that's why he's so valuable. Why Coach Matt Painter put CJ into that starting lineup. But then in the second half against Miami, Purdue starts to get a little bit of a lead, but tragedy strikes. And not necessarily tragedy, because we do have some good news about CJ Cox, but in the moment, it looked disastrous because CJ, he hits the ground, he holds his knee screaming. I was terrified. I was really worried that, I don't want to speculate, but it always looks like an ACL whenever someone grabs their knee like that. That's what I was hoping wasn't the case. And now we do know that CJ Cox did not tear his ACL, which is amazing news. John Rothstein reported in the middle of that game, or towards the end of that game, that CJ, he came back positive, or negative rather, where he was able to come back to the bench. It was a positive. He tested negative for anything significant within the knee. It was just a hyperextension. So if he wanted to, or if Coach Matt Painter wanted to play CJ in the second half of that Miami game, he absolutely could have. Now, does that mean that CJ is good to go? I don't necessarily know if that's the case. I think that he'll be ready to play. I think he'll be available to play in San Jose, but I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the CJ Cox that we're used to. And Coach Matt Painter says something a little bit similar to that when discussing CJ Cox in the post-game press conference heading towards San Jose. He says, well, I don't really know what's gonna be the deal with CJ. Yes, he's technically available. There is nothing significant that came up over besides that hyper extension inside of the knee when evaluating it, but I still don't know what his status is going to be for San Jose. And you can take this a couple of different ways. The number one way, which I feel like this is definitely a possibility, I think both of these two factors could play something into it. And the first thing that Matt Painter says is that we're still evaluating, we're still trying to see, and being cautious with CJ, because now at most you have 4 games left in the season. You're going to need him to play for those. So you don't want to risk him going in playing full speed like he has been and then hurting it worse than what happened before when it was just a hyperextension. So that's number one, and probably definitely a factor in what the status is going to be of CJ Cox going into Texas on Thursday. But the other part of this, and the more intriguing thing to me, is not showing your hand. You don't want to show your hand to Texas. And even though there are reports coming out that CJ is available or that he'll be good to go, I kind of like Painter sitting and saying, we don't really know what's going to happen with CJ because Texas doesn't know what's going to happen with CJ. And that's the perfect place to be. You want to have Texas vulnerable, not knowing what's going to happen with one of our most crucial players in the starting lineup and our best defenders. So I like the strategy of not giving your hand, not showing what CJ is going to be or what he's going to do going into Thursday. But from all reports, from all sightings, it seems like he should be available to play in San Jose and that the knee is okay. And he says that himself in the press conference in the locker room after that game against Miami. And yes, it's the player talking, so you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But CJ Cox says, I would do anything for my team. I would have gotten back in that game on one knee had I had to. And that shows a lot about the character of CJ Cox, but I don't feel like you can necessarily take that as gospel or say we know his injury status now because he said he was willing to go back in that game, because there are tons of players that would do that with so many different injuries. I respect CJ for that, but we can't take that as an injury diagnostic. I think that what we can take is the fact that John Rothstein, he reported that CJ would have been good to go back in that game, that Matt Painter was positive about the injury to CJ Cox, and that CJ Cox was back on the bench before the end of that game. Those are all positives for me heading into San Jose, but we still have to keep an eye on that knee and how it affects CJ's play going into Thursday. Now, Purdue does have a solid little break, 3-day break, rather, before having to play that game on Thursday, which will be a positive for his recovery, but it's still something to certainly keep an eye on if you're a Purdue fan. Now, Ja'Cory Harris, he stepped up in a big way against Miami in that second half when CJ does end up going out, but I would still rather have CJ Cox than no CJ Cox on the team. And I would rather even have a little bit of an injured as long as he's not risking further injuring himself. That's the big key here is I would rather have him if he's a little bit slower, if he's not as quick off the jump, than if he just wasn't on the floor at all. So that's something to look at for Purdue fans heading into Thursday's matchup. Can CJ Cox produce against Texas? And it's going to be so important for CJ to play because it's one of the biggest matchups for him all season long. And Texas has a guy that's going to do exactly what CJ Cox was brought in to do. And Dalyn Swain, he's their leading scorer with 17 points a game, leading rebounder, leads the team in assists, leading stealer on the team. So Dalyn Swain does almost everything out of that backcourt for Texas. That's the perfect matchup for you to throw CJ on him. That's why this injury is so crucial, or lack of injury, whatever we're sitting with right now. That's why the status of CJ Cox is so crucial heading into these last few games, because all the teams left have someone that you would love for CJ Cox to guard. Dalyn Swain is that guy against Texas, so we're hoping that CJ Cox is back up to 100%, hoping he's back up to full speed, because he is going to be crucial in trying to shut down this Texas Longhorns offense. Let's hope that he's good for Thursday, but reports do look optimistic in terms of CJ Cox being good to go for Thursday's Sweet 16 matchup against the Longhorns. But what about the other Sweet 16 teams left? Who is the best? Who has the best path of getting to Indianapolis this year? Well, I'm going to answer those questions when we rank the remaining Sweet 16 teams 1 through 6. I give you my power rankings. That's coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. What is sports? We're trading like markets. Well, now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market where you can buy or sell your positions live all game long, using your sports knowledge in the moments that matter, because Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people in the moving action, so when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. And I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. But now I can actually take part live in a market powered by the people. We are no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. So trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission and swap firm. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, those deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still setting up. And when the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for. That means skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have already made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Well, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. We're back on today's Locked On Boilermakers to get into my Sweet 16 rankings. My bracket, it's in the trash right now, but I'm going to repick the Sweet 16. It's my show, so we'll cheat the system a little bit. I'm just kidding. We're just going to do some power rankings. I have all the teams left right now ranked from 1 to 16 in terms of how well do I think they're going to be able to do in the next couple rounds this weekend. How far do I think they can get? How good are they? How good have they been playing? And the most important part in factoring into making these rankings probably is what the path is remaining for these teams. The tougher path, they're probably going to get a lower ranking compared to a team that has a better shot of getting to Indianapolis. So we're going to get into that. But before we do, just want to tell you guys about a couple cool things. The first of which being, it's my first season here on the Locked On Podcast Network. First year starting up Locked On Boilermaker. So if you guys are new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It helps me out a ton. I'm just a few subscribers away from my goal of reaching 1,000. It just really helps the channel grow. So thank you guys for that. The second thing is the Everydayer Club, where you're already going to get that ad-free Locked On Boilermakers content. You're already going to get access to me, to all the everydayers in our Everydayer exclusive Discord chat. But right now is the perfect time to join the Everydayer Club because you're going to get a month free by using code March in the link set below down in the description or the show notes. Get in there. It's such a fun time in the Everydayer Club. But let's get into my power rankings for the Sweet 16 right now. The teams remaining, I'll give some good explanations behind why I have them where they're at. I'll start at 16. We'll make our way up. And at 16, I have Iowa as the lowest team left in the power rankings. Now, they pulled off a great upset in the round of 32 against Florida. Of course, Fulgaris had that corner shot that sent the Gators home. Man, that was a heck of a game. Xavier Lee takes it down baseline, but can't get a shot off. I'm not a big Xavier Lee fan, so I was okay with that. But I'm just saying that Iowa's probably going to be the least likely team to win a national championship this year because, number one, they are that 9 seed, so that is something you have to factor in here. And then number two, the path, having to go through a team like Nebraska, which is tough, but then you have Houston or Illinois on the other side. I don't see Iowa making it out of Nebraska, but I definitely don't see them making it out of that South region they're in. So I'm going to say Iowa is the least likely team. I've got Texas as the next least likely. Having to play through Purdue as the 11th seed is going to be tough, but then you have to play through a Purdue, then maybe an Arizona or an Arkansas. Both those games are going to be tough for Texas. I don't see them getting past Purdue necessarily, so I'm going to have Texas as our 15th team in terms of power rankings. Moving on, we've got Tennessee, who pulled the upset over Virginia. That was a game that busted the last perfect bracket left after that perfect bracket lasted longer than in the history of March Madness. So Tennessee, they pull off quite the upset. They beat a Virginia team that was playing good ball towards the end of the regular season. Do I think they get a crazy far? No, not really. I think they lose to Iowa State. Iowa State's just a more physical team. They can shoot the ball a little bit better. I think that Iowa State does most things better than what Tennessee has to offer. Nate Ament has really gotten into his role as the year has progressed after a little bit of a shaky start for a guy who is projected to be a top 5 pick in the NBA draft. So I do think that Tennessee is vulnerable as well. They're going to be at 14 for me. And then someone else in that Midwest region, Alabama, is actually going to be at 13. Now, they put up a great performance in the round of 32. I was impressed with the way that they played up against Texas Tech, but not having Aiden Holloway right now, who has gotten himself into a little bit of legal troubles, I think that could come back to bite Alabama eventually, especially playing up against the number one team right now in that Midwest region, Michigan. I do think that the Wolverines are going to win that game, and I think it's going to be tough, even if Alabama does advance past Michigan, to keep moving on past a team like Iowa State. So I think that Alabama is sitting right there around that 12-13 range, but I've got them right now at 13 in terms of my power rankings. Then I've got Nebraska, who they're a great team. They're in good positioning, but I really like that Illinois-Houston bottom part of that South region. I think whoever wins that game is going to be dancing right into the Final Four in Indianapolis. Both those teams are incredibly deep this year. They can rebound the ball. They're physical. They can get it inside. So I think that Illinois and Houston are going to be both tough teams to make it through. For Nebraska, above Nebraska at 10, I've got Arkansas. And Arkansas is one that they have two tough teams in their West region still. That is Purdue and it's Arizona. As good as the Hogs have been playing as of late, they have had an easy path. They haven't seen a tough game like Arizona. So as much as I hope Calipari's team does beat the Wildcats, I don't necessarily see it happening anymore. I do think that Arkansas has a chance. I just don't know if they're going to be able to do that. And then making it through Arizona, having to come back and potentially playing a Purdue or a Texas, I think those are two tough matchups for the Hogs right now. So I'm going to have Arkansas right there above Nebraska at my 10 spot. St. John's is going to be my 9. Patino, they have that last second shot to upset Kansas the other day after Kansas just fouls them 5 or 6 times down the stretch of that one. I was happy to see the Johnnies come away with a victory, but having to play through Duke in that region is very tough. That East region, you still have Duke on the board. You still have Michigan State. You still have UConn. St. John's is the worst team left in that conference, even having beat UConn for that Big East championship. So I think St. John's is a little bit in trouble in these next couple of rounds, as good as they've played as of late. I could see them potentially beating Duke. I could see them beating Duke, though, but I'm going to have the Johnnies slotted right around that 9 spot. Then we got Utah. We got UConn, right? Not Utah, UConn, right above the Johnnies. I think that UConn's good, but with some injury concerns surrounding their team right now, I don't necessarily know if they're as good as the 2 seed shows. I think that they're the worst remaining 2 seed out of the 4 still dancing right now in the shows, because I've got them below some 3 seeds as well. I've got UConn coming in right here above St. John's, but below my next team, which is Illinois. Illinois is going to be one that I think could very well make it to the Final Four if they're able to beat Houston. But that's going to be a big task because Houston is playing great basketball right now. So I think Illinois is just one of those teams. If they can make it through the Sweet 16, they have a genuine path of even making it to a national championship. So the next game is going to be very crucial for Illinois. I'm right there with Michigan State, who I have as my 7 team still left in the Sweet 16. They're above Illinois for the pure fact that UConn is a better matchup than Houston in this Sweet 16. I think that they'll have a better shot of advancing to the Elite 8. Now, is playing through a team like Duke going to be easier than playing through a team like Nebraska? I don't necessarily know about that, but I think the Houston matchup is tough enough. It's tough enough that it justifies putting Michigan State over Illinois just because of that path. Not that I think Michigan State is playing better ball right now than Illinois, but I think they have a bit of a simpler path to getting to that Final Four. The team I got above Michigan State as we start to get into these 2 seeds is Iowa State. They come in at my 6th team right now in terms of having the power rankings, having the ability to get to the Final Four. I think that Iowa State is brilliant, but all eyes on Joshua Jefferson right now. He should be back for that Sweet 16 matchup against Tennessee. If he is, they should have no trouble against the Volunteers, but anything can happen. Anything can happen with Joshua Jefferson, but that team has a ton of different shooters that can rebound the ball. The only worry for Iowa State is when they get down the stretch of games, close games, can they make the free throw shots to compete with other teams. That's been their biggest concern. One of the worst free throw shooting teams in Division I this year. So that's something for Iowa State, but I still think they're number 6 in terms of the teams left remaining. My Purdue Boilermakers come in at number 5 on my power rankings. I have them here because Arizona is still on the board, and I think that's going to be a tough matchup for Purdue. I think that Purdue's playing just as good basketball as anyone in the nation right now, and I would take them up against anybody, but I just get so concerned about Arizona because they're so deep, they're so physical. They have Cole Pete, who is probably one of the best freshmen out there. I'd say top 5. Is that a hot take? I don't know, but I think he's a top 5 freshman right now. Arizona, they are a squad. So I have Purdue at number 5 for that pure reason. Duke is going to be at number 4. The reason I say that is because they've looked a little bit vulnerable as of late. If you look at playing Siena, that round of 64, almost losing to a 64 seed, and then you go against TCU, there are stretches of that game where Duke didn't look perfect. I think the Caleb Foster injury has really hurt that team. So Duke is going to come in at my number 4. Arizona will be my number 3. They still have to play through Purdue, probably, assuming that Purdue doesn't lose to Texas. I think that's one of the toughest 2-seed matchups still left on the board right now for Arizona. So they're going to come in at my number 3. Houston is my highest seed as a 2. They're my highest 2 seed. They're also number 2 overall in my power rankings. Now, I say this because if they beat Illinois, they will be in a Final Four. I think Houston easily beats a team like Nebraska. I think they easily beat an Iowa if they somehow get there. I'm really big on Houston. I actually have them winning it all this year, so I like the Cougars to advance to the Final Four. I think they're playing amazing basketball right now. They're number 2 in my power rankings, and number 1 is the Michigan Wolverines. They have the easiest region still left remaining, even with LJ Casey out. They're playing really great basketball. Jackson Lindenberg looks like a star out there right now. They have their bigs. They have their guards. Elliot Cadeau, when he's on the floor, is able to provide great minutes. So I like Michigan to be my number 1 overall team in terms of power rankings right now. But as you guys know, in March Madness, anything can happen. And for Purdue, they're hoping that's not the case on Thursday against the Texas Longhorns. The Boilermakers are favored by 8.5 points. Can they actually win by that margin? Well, we'll figure out the keys to beating Texas coming up here next on Locked On Boilermakers. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The biggest stretch of college basketball season is almost here. That means buzzer beaters, bracket busters, and those unforgettable moments that everyone's talking about the next day. Well, being there live for something like that, that's bucket list stuff. And the hard part is actually getting the tickets. With the long queues, prices jumping around, and surprise fees at the checkout, the Game Time app gives fans the advantage with constant innovation. It's how you unlock amazing tickets and experiences in just a few taps because it's incredibly simple to use. The Game Time guarantee means 100% legitimate tickets. So you're always delivered on time at the best price. And here's the best part. Fees are included in the price you see. What you see is what you pay, period. So no stress, no guesswork, just a smooth experience from start to finish. And that's exactly what you want during the busiest part of the season. So take the guesswork out of buying college basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and you redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Today's episode also gladly brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The tournament is here. One of the best times of the year. That means bracket busters, buzzer beaters, upsets. It's nonstop action from the tip to the final cut down. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a way to stay in the action all tournament long. And here's the best part. You get up to $300 back in bonus bets every day for 10 days. That means 10 chances to stay involved throughout the entire tournament where you can mix it up however you want between game picks, futures, or even same-game parlays for bigger potential payouts. It's perfect for the tournament because every day there's something new. Different matchups, new storylines, and more ways to get involved as the bracket unfolds. So head on over and visit FanDuel.com to sign up today. That's FanDuel.com to get in on the action. We're back today to finish up today's Locked On Boilermakers, where I want to wrap up today's episode getting into a little bit for Thursday's Texas versus Purdue matchup. Now, we'll have a full preview coming out either tomorrow or it'll definitely be tomorrow, either tomorrow or Thursday at the latest with Locked On Longhorns. That's going to be a fun one, so you guys aren't going to want to miss that episode. But I do want to get a little bit into this because I've been previewing this matchup throughout the week, and I'm actually really excited about it. I think Purdue has a really good chance. They match up against the Longhorns pretty well, especially when you figure in the fact that that Texas has played an extra game compared to Purdue. So I've gotten 3 keys to victory for Purdue in this game against Texas. And that's what I want to tell you guys about as we end out today's show. The first one for me is absolutely defend the paint. And the reason why I say defend the paint and not win inside or win the front court like we typically say here on the show when we have a key like this is because I think Purdue could win this game without scoring in the paint, but I don't think Texas could win this game without scoring in the paint. And the reason why I say that is because Purdue is a better 3-point shooting team. They can get their points in other ways, where we've seen with Texas throughout the tournament, their key to victory has really been get it to big 7-footer Matas Vokaitidis, the Lithuanian center, up in the middle of the floor. Let him cook inside. Let him score those points in the paint. So I feel like if you're Purdue and you're able to defend the paint, you're going to have a good shot at winning this game. As long as you can keep Vokaitidis from producing at a high level, you got a good shot. So I really like what Purdue is going to be able to do in this game in terms of just keeping him out of the paint, forcing him to take mid-range shots, forcing Texas to take threes and saying, we like those shots for you. We like our shots better. We have a better chance to win this game if we're able to defend the paint. So that's my first key for Purdue. My second one is going to be CJ Cox. Much like we let out with this episode, CJ is going to be crucial for Purdue in this game because he's going to have to defend Texas's best guard, and we know what he offers. He's leading scorer, leads him in assists, leads him in rebounds, leads him in steals. He really does it all. So for CJ, it's going to be huge in terms of playing defense. Also, if he's healthy, the ability to have that another guard off the ball that's low volume, but he can make a lot of shots at a high rate. That's what CJ offers. That's what 11 points in 18 minutes against Miami shows me. And if he's able to do something even similar to that against Texas, Purdue is going to have a really good chance at winning this game. And then the last key that I have for Purdue, and debatably the most important one at all for Purdue, it's going to be execute. You have to execute in the Sweet 16. And for a team that against Miami, Braden Smith turned the ball over 8 times, you can't do that and win against Texas. They're going to take advantage of that. So Braden Smith needs to be better in terms of not turning the ball over. Everyone has to be better in terms of not turning the ball over. This team has the experience over Texas. We had the retention. We have 4 starters in our starting lineup, so we have to show it. You're playing up against a former teammate in Cameron Heide. That's going to be a fun one. How do these guys get up for a game like that? There's so many different factors heading into this matchup against Texas on Thursday, and we're going to get into all of it a little bit later in the week. But the big 3 keys to beating the Longhorns is going to be defending the paint. Don't let Vokaitidis get anything easy. CJ Cox, depending on his status, we need a big game for him if he's able to go. And then, of course, execute. You have the experience. Utilize it. Don't make freshman plays. Don't turn the ball over. Make good shots. Shoot good shots. Purdue's able to do those 3 things. They have a very good chance of advancing to the Elite 8 to play on Saturday. That's the goal. We've got a lot of dancing left to do, and it all starts up on Thursday. Texas Longhorns, number 11 versus Purdue, number 2. We'll have a full preview coming out this week, so make sure you guys join us once again on Locked On Boilermakers for that. But that's all I got for you guys on today's episode. So as always, boiler up, hammer down.